Greetings booktube, Sean here, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well. Apologies for the crappy lighting. I'm filming this after work and therefore I'm stuck with the two spotlights in this room, and I've just realised not only do they give everything a kind of yellowish jaundice kind of hue, which I already knew about, but also in addition they make my forehead look like a car on full beam. I mean, that is quite frightening. I'm surprised you guys can see anything out there. It's like a sheet of glass. It's okay if I lean back here, but I don't want to be leant back here for the entire video, so I'm afraid you're going to have to put up with it. Anyway, as I say, welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to the booktube blazer. It is back, folks. It wasn't going to be when I originally sat down to do this video, because my flat has been so warm today. I decided I was going to skip the blazer, but then I noticed in my YouTube notifications a new video on Steve Partridge's channel, which I haven't watched yet, but for which the last two words in the title were something like smashing blazer. It may have been, was it smashing? It may have been splendid blazer. Splendid sounds more English, right? So it could have been that. Anyway, some, adjective blazer. And I took this to be a kind of divine sign that Steve is now fully indoctrinated. He's fully on board with the belief system, the aims and goals of the Blazers for Booktube movement. And as the person who recruited him, it would be a gross dereliction of duty if I was to film and upload a video on the same day he comes out, where I am not wearing the prescribed religious attire of our cult, movement. And therefore here we are, and I'm wearing the booktube blazer, and I think we can all agree, if I end up in a kind of sweaty puddle in the middle of the chair, if I melt into the chair in the second half of this video due to the heat, if I perspire due to heat exhaustion, then we should all agree that it is definitely Steve's fault. Now, when we normally say that on booktube, we're normally referring to Steve Donahue, of course, so I should, for the purposes of clarity, say that in this case I'm referring to Steve Partridge. And if you're a new subscriber here, you're probably wondering by this point, what the hell have I stumbled into? You're probably asking, isn't this a booktube channel, Sean? When are you going to start talking about books? What is all this shit about blazers? So I would respond to you by saying, good questions, firstly. Secondly, please do go and check out my small booktuber shout out video, which is the last video on this channel. Not only will that answer, hopefully, all of your blazer related questions, but it will also, one hopes, recommend to you 6 smaller booktubers who are criminally undersubscribed and worthy of your attention. So go and check that out. It also includes the aforementioned Steve Partridge in that video. So, on to the matter in hand. Well, not quite. Again, as a new subscriber, you may have to get used to the fact it normally takes me 3 or 4 minutes to get to the kind of main topic. What I want to do first, before I talk about my February TBR, is just do 2 quick thank yous for 2 channels who've done shout outs for me in the last 24 to 48 hours. The first is Cheryl over on the channel CR Flames Fan, and the second is Beth on the channel Beth Chats Books. Thank you very much to both of those. I will link their channels down below, and I would encourage you to go and check out their channels as well. Now we get on to TBRs. My February TBR. I'm not somebody who has traditionally filmed monthly TBRs. I've done TBRs for kind of readathons, that kind of thing. But in terms of the monthly TBR, I've always had, I've always wanted to retain a certain flexibility in my reading as more of a kind of mood reader, where read the book, finish it, and then go and check out your shelves, check out my shelves to determine what book I want to read next. And that has some advantages. So, for example, if you read a emotionally harrowing book, you might want to pick up a palate cleanser next. So the idea of a prescribed kind of list of books that I'm working my way through for the month, particularly one that I've kind of communicated and put out into the booktube world in a video, was not something that really appealed to me. However, I have kind of come round to the idea of monthly TBRs in probably the last 3 or 4 months, and the reasons for that are, firstly, I'm involved in a few more reading groups than I used to be when I first joined booktube, and that means that my the books that I'm going to be reading are kind of known in advance in particular months. So I already have a kind of a skeleton of my TBR for any given month, because I know what some of the books are going to be. Tied to that is the fact that I want to make more astute use of my library, rather than just getting a load of books out and then returning half of them unread because I've not been organised enough to get round to reading them. And so that means getting fewer books out of the library, but being more structured about when I read them, and taking advantage of the reservations system where you can reserve books from other libraries and have them delivered to your local library for pickup. That actually requires some planning and some structuring that doesn't fit with my kind of free-for-all cavalier kind of reading style from before. And the final reason, the community-orientated one, I suppose, is unless you tell people what you are reading in a particular month, unless there's some kind of psychic, it doesn't give them the opportunity to kind of read along, do buddy reads, that kind of thing. So that's the kind of third reason. And I'd just like to say on this channel, if you see anything on the TBR that takes your fancy, you want to do a very informal kind of buddy read, then, because that's what it will be with me, then let me know in the comments, and it's an open invitation, and I'll try and make it happen if I can. So that's brought me to the position where I'm now going to talk about the books that I'm going to be reading in February. And I'm going to start with a book that is a hangover from January. I'm not going to say much about this because it's a book that I'm not sure that I'm going to prioritise too greatly in February. I'm about halfway through. It's Georgian London, Into the Streets by Lucy Inglis. This was the non-fic history book pick for January, and I struggled to get through it. I may not pick it up again in February, but it may be one that I dip in and out of at various parts, but it's not going to be a priority for me. I'll just say that Gemma, who hosts that reading group on the channel Non-Fic Books, posted a review of this book and the reasons she DNF'd it. If you are interested in this book, I would recommend going and checking out that review, because it does give some very good reasons for why this book is not going to work for all people. So that's that one. The next book is another history book, and I'm starting with all my non-fiction here first. This is a book that's actually happened by complete coincidence to be both the pick for February for the previously mentioned non-fic history book group hosted by Gemma, but also for the Blast from the Past reading group, which is hosted by Robyn on the channel Driftless Reader. I'll link these channels down below. Now, the Blast from the Past reading group normally does historical fiction, but by complete sort of happenstance, in February, Robyn had picked a non-fiction book, a straight-out history book, which had already been picked by Gemma for her February pick. So it's 2 for 1. And this is The Private Lives of Tudors by Tracy Borman. Sorry, it's about as shiny as my forehead, isn't it, though? This is not like the normal history I read, in that it's very much about the running of the Tudor monarch's household, and it's about the courtiers and attendants and the lady-in-waiting and some of the behind-the-scenes habits of some of the Tudor monarchs. So this is not the normal kind of history that I would read, which tend to be about the big events, the political events, international affairs. So it's going to be an interesting read to see whether this is something that I like or not, but it does sound from the synopsis like it's got some interesting reads. For scatological reasons, one of the things that jumped out at me was that Henry VIII had a groom of the stool who, quote, would stand patiently by as Henry VIII performed his daily purges. Interesting job. The next book is for my history group at my local bookshop. The topic this month is the Italian Renaissance, and I picked up The Medici by Paul Straithan. This is a kind of rise and fall of the Medici family, who were of course one of the major power players in medieval Italian politics, based in Florence, and started as a banking family. I know very little about the Medici. I know very little about this period of history, aside from what I've seen in the TV show The Borgias. So yeah, looking forward to getting to that one. And the final non-fiction book is one that I kind of put on my list this month as a response to people who've been doing or mentioning books on their TBR related to Black History Month, which it is in America in February. It's not Black History Month in the UK until October. But I picked up this book from the library. It is I Can't Breathe The Killing That Started a Movement by Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi is a journalist who writes predominantly for the Rolling Stone. I've read one of his previous books called Griftopia and enjoyed it. I'm about 50 pages in, but this is about, apologies for the shine on the cover again, it's about the death in 2014 of a guy called Eric Garner, a black guy, who was killed during his arrest by New York police officers, and this event was filmed. The title, I Can't Breathe, comes from that video of his attempted arrest, where he's saying to the officers as he's wrestled to the ground that he can't breathe, and Taibbi then draws the links between that event and the kind of start of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I thought that was a good pick to link in with the Black History Month for the United States this in February. So that concludes the non-fiction books. I've now got a couple of fiction books that I'll mention that I've got not physical books. The first is The Nix by Nathan Hill, which is an audio book that I'm working my way through at the moment. I'm about just over halfway through. Really enjoying this. It's an interesting tale of an English professor in his 30s called Samuel, and it's about how he gets sucked back into his mother's life after she decides as an act of political protest to pelt this potential presidential candidate with stones, and it goes viral, and Samuel gets drawn back into his mother's life. Now his mother abandoned him as a child, so there's a lot of unanswered questions there, and you also get some perspectives of the mother's earlier life, which presumably, I've not got that far yet, sort of maybe explain why she did what she did in terms of abandoning him as a child. But I'm really enjoying it. It's got a great humour to it. It's a debut novel, and it's written with great panache, I think. So looking forward to finishing that off. I'm just hoping he can sustain the same pace and humour all the way through the book. So that's The Nix by Nathan Hill. The next book that I don't have a physical copy of is The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. There's a great review of this on Olive Channel, a book Olive, which I'll link down below. But this is a story which starts in, I think, the 1950s. It's about four siblings who go along to a fortune teller and have their fortune told, how their life is going to pan out, and then it follows these four siblings through their lives, and I guess the main point of the narrative is whether knowing how your future is going to pan out impacts ultimately how you live your life. Sounds really interesting. Keen to pick it up. It doesn't come out in physical form, I don't think, physical book form in the UK until March, but I picked it up on my Kindle in January, I think, so I want to get to it as quickly as I can in February. Now the next book, the penultimate book on my TBR, is a reread. This is one of my favourite books of all time, The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This is a kind of Indian family saga which is split over two timelines, one in the past and one in the present day, and it kind of looks at various social issues in India, including the kind of caste system. I absolutely loved this when the book first came out. I've read it about 2 or 3 times, I think, but I haven't read it in maybe 4 or 5 years, and I'm a bit nervous to pick this up as kind of one of my favourite books of all time, as to whether my reading tastes have changed and whether I'm actually going to enjoy it this time. So that's I also want to read that because I want to kind of compare it to The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, which was Roy's second book, which I'm planning on reading later in the year, just to see how her writing has changed, because there's a 20-year gap between the release of The God of Small Things and The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, which came out last year and was longlisted for the Booker, I think. So the final book that I want to pick up is Hero of Ages, which is the 3rd book in the Mistborn trilogy. Don't want to say too much about this because most people know about it, and also because it's the 3rd book in a trilogy, and I don't want to give too much away. I read The Well of Ascension in January. Didn't enjoy it as much as the first book, although it still has some rip-roaring kind of battle scenes and excellent pacing in parts. I did have some issues with the ending, but I'm hoping that this book will kind of bring it back on track. And I'm told that this book is one that kind of it is kind of really kind of emotionally charged towards the ending. So another chunkster as well, 700 and odd pages. So I'm hoping to get through that this month. So that's my TBR for February. Apologies that this video has run on again for 15 odd minutes. I don't seem to be able to do short videos, mainly because I spend too much time pissing around at the beginning, but I appreciate you if you've watched all this way. Let me know what you think about some of these books. Don't give any spoilers away, but let me know if you read some of these books and a kind of general opinion. As I said earlier in the video, if you want to do a buddy read then on any of these, let me know and I'll try and make that happen as well. Other than that, take care of yourselves. I will see you in my next video.